A missile is flying toward an aircraft carrier. It's 22 feet long, weighs 2,000 pounds, and is moving at 600 miles per hour, just below the speed of sound. It cost $2 million to build. Its target, the USS Gerald R. Ford, is 1,092 feet long, weighs 100,000 tons, carries 5,000 human beings, and cost $13 billion to build. The missile will reach the carrier in approximately 4 minutes. In those 4 minutes, the most advanced naval defense system ever created will attempt to detect, track, and destroy an object the size of a telephone pole moving at the speed of a bullet. If the defense works, $2 million turns into debris raining into the ocean. If the defense fails, $13 billion and potentially thousands of lives are in jeopardy. This is the math problem that is rewriting naval warfare, and nobody is entirely sure of the answer. Let's start with the missile, because understanding the threat is the first step to understanding whether the defense can stop it. The modern anti-ship cruise missile is the product of 70 years of engineering focused on one goal: hitting a ship that doesn't want to be hit. The most widely proliferated anti-ship missile in the world is the Chinese YJ-18. It's the weapon most likely to be fired at an American carrier in a real conflict, so let's use it as our example. The YJ-18 is a two-stage missile. For most of its flight, it cruises at subsonic speed, roughly 600 miles per hour, at an altitude of between 15 and 30 feet above the ocean surface. 15 feet. That's lower than most buildings. At that altitude, the curvature of the Earth limits radar detection range to roughly 20 to 25 miles. That means a ship's radar might only see the missile when it's 60 to 90 seconds away. But here's the truly terrifying part. In its terminal phase, the last 10 to 15 miles, the YJ-18 drops its cruise stage, ignites a second motor, and accelerates to Mach 3. 3 times the speed of sound. Over 2,000 miles per hour, at 15 feet above the water. A defending ship goes from having 90 seconds to react to having roughly 15 seconds. At Mach 3, the missile covers a mile every 2 seconds. The warhead weighs roughly 350 to 500 pounds. That doesn't sound like much against a 100,000-ton ship. But the warhead isn't the only weapon. At Mach 3, the missile itself is a kinetic weapon. The impact energy of a 2,000-pound object hitting steel at 3 times the speed of sound is roughly equivalent to 500 pounds of TNT, on top of the actual explosive warhead. And the YJ-18 isn't even the scariest missile pointed at carriers. The Chinese DF-21D, the so-called carrier killer, is a medium-range ballistic missile. It launches into space, re-enters the atmosphere, and dives onto a carrier from directly above at over Mach 10. 10 times the speed of sound, from straight up. The DF-26 has even longer range, over 2,500 miles, and reportedly can hit moving ships at sea. If it works as advertised, a DF-26 launched from mainland China can reach a carrier operating near Guam. Then there's Russia's Zircon hypersonic missile, Mach 9, sea skimming, with a range of over 600 miles. And the BrahMos Mark II being developed by India and Russia, Mach 7. The threat is real, it's growing, and it's getting faster every year. So how does a carrier defend itself? The answer is, it doesn't. Not alone. A carrier never operates alone. It sails at the center of a carrier strike group, surrounded by a defensive bubble that extends hundreds of miles in every direction. The carrier is the thing being protected. Everything else in the strike group exists to keep it alive. The defense is organized in layers. Think of it like the rings of a target. The carrier is the bullseye, and an incoming missile has to penetrate every ring to reach it. Each layer is designed to reduce the number of missiles that make it through to the next layer. Layer 1, the outer ring, starts over 500 miles from the carrier. This is the detection and disruption layer. Its job isn't to shoot down missiles. Its job is to prevent missiles from ever being launched in the first place, or to confuse them if they are. The E-2D Advanced Hawkeye is the carrier's eyes. It's a turboprop aircraft with a massive radar dome that can detect air and surface targets at ranges exceeding 300 miles. It orbits above the strike group and provides the big picture, where every aircraft, ship, and missile is within a 300-mile radius. F/A-18 Super Hornets fly combat air patrols at the outer edge of the defensive zone. Their job is to shoot down enemy launch platforms, bombers, maritime patrol aircraft, before they can fire their missiles. Kill the archer before he releases the arrow. EA-18G Growlers, the electronic warfare variant of the Super Hornet, provide electronic attack. They can jam enemy radars, disrupt missile guidance systems, and create false targets. An incoming missile that relies on radar guidance can be seduced away from the carrier and toward a phantom target that doesn't exist. Submarines operating ahead of the strike group hunt for enemy submarines and surface ships. They're the invisible tripwire, the first layer of defense that the enemy never sees. Satellites and land-based intelligence provide early warning of missile launches. If China fires a DF-21D from the mainland, U.S. satellites can detect the launch within seconds. That doesn't stop the missile, but it gives the strike group precious minutes to prepare. Layer 2, the middle ring, extends from roughly 100 miles down to about 15 miles from the carrier. This is the hard kill zone. The goal here is to physically destroy incoming missiles. The Aegis combat system is the brain. Installed on the Ticonderoga-class cruisers and Arleigh Burke-class destroyers that escort the carrier, Aegis is the most advanced naval combat system in the world. It can simultaneously track over 100 targets and coordinate the engagement of multiple missiles at the same time. The primary weapon in this layer is the SM-6 Standard missile. The SM-6 has a range of over 150 miles and can engage targets at altitudes from sea level to the edge of space. It can hit cruise missiles, ballistic missiles in their terminal phase, and even enemy aircraft. Each SM-6 costs roughly $4.3 million. Against a ballistic missile like the DF-21D, the SM-3 missile provides an exo-atmospheric intercept capability, meaning it can destroy the missile while it's still in space, before it re-enters the atmosphere and begins its terminal dive. This is the best chance to stop a ballistic anti-ship missile. because once it re-enters at Mach 10, interception becomes exponentially harder. A typical Aegis destroyer carries roughly 90 to 96 missiles in its vertical launch system. A carrier strike group has 2 to 3 cruisers and destroyers, giving the group a total magazine of roughly 250 to 300 defensive missiles. That sounds like a lot. Remember that number. Layer 3, the inner ring, is the last line of defense. This is close-in, knife-fight territory. If a missile makes it past the outer and middle layers, these systems are all that stands between the missile and the ship. The Evolved Sea Sparrow missile, ESSM, has a range of roughly 30 miles. It's smaller and faster reacting than the SM-6, designed specifically for close-in defense against sea-skimming cruise missiles. Each Aegis ship can carry dozens of them in quad-packed cells. The Rolling Airframe Missile, RAM, is a short-range, fire-and-forget missile mounted on carriers and escort ships. Range of roughly 6 miles. It's designed to engage missiles that have gotten past everything else. It's fast, it's autonomous, and it's the last guided weapon in the chain. And then there's the Phalanx CIWS, the close-in weapon system, the R2D2 of naval warfare. It's a radar-guided 20mm Gatling gun that fires 4,500 rounds per minute. Its range is roughly 1 mile. It automatically detects, tracks, and engages incoming missiles without human input. It is literally the last thing standing between a missile and the hull of the ship. At 1 mile, a Mach 3 missile covers the distance in about 1.5 seconds. The Phalanx has roughly 1.5 seconds to detect the missile, calculate a firing solution, spin up the gun, and put enough bullets in the air to hit an object the size of a telephone pole moving at 2,000 miles per hour. It works, most of the time. In testing, the Phalanx has a hit rate of roughly 75 to 85% against subsonic targets. Against supersonic targets, the numbers drop. Against hypersonic targets, Mach 5 and above, the honest answer is nobody knows, because no one has tested it against a real hypersonic threat in combat conditions. Now let's talk about what happens if a missile gets through. Because statistically, in a saturation attack, some will. A single anti-ship cruise missile hitting a Nimitz-class carrier would not sink it. Let me say that clearly. One missile will not sink an aircraft carrier. The ship has over 2,000 watertight compartments. It has Kevlar armor over critical spaces. It has redundant systems for almost everything. It was designed to take hits and keep fighting. But not sinking and still combat effective are very different things. A missile striking the flight deck would create a crater roughly 15 to 20 feet across, showering the deck with shrapnel and starting fires among parked aircraft. Flight operations would stop immediately. Every jet on the flight deck near the impact would be damaged or destroyed. Fuel lines running beneath the deck could rupture, feeding fires that burn for hours. A missile striking the island, the command structure on the starboard side of the flight deck, would potentially destroy the carrier's primary radar systems, air traffic control, and the flag bridge where the admiral commands the strike group. The ship would go partially blind. A missile striking at the waterline could breach the hull, flood compartments, and potentially damage propulsion systems. The carrier might develop a list, a tilt to one side, that makes flight operations impossible even if the deck is intact. In 1967, the USS Forrestal suffered an accidental fire on the flight deck that killed 134 sailors and injured 161. The fire was started by a single errant rocket. 1. The resulting fire and explosions destroyed 21 aircraft and nearly sank the ship. It took the crew 14 hours to control the fire. A modern anti-ship missile impact would be significantly worse than what happened on the Forrestal. Now here's the scenario that keeps admirals awake at night. Not one missile. 50. A saturation attack is the deliberate launch of more missiles than the defense can handle. The math is simple and brutal. A carrier strike group has roughly 250 to 300 defensive missiles. But not all of them can be used for anti-missile defense. Some are reserved for anti-aircraft and anti-submarine warfare. Realistically, a strike group can engage perhaps 150 to 200 incoming missiles before it runs dry. China has an estimated 1,500 to 2,000 short and medium-range anti-ship missiles within range of Taiwan. Not all would be launched at a single carrier strike group. But China's doctrine, as described in PLA military publications, explicitly calls for overwhelming American naval defenses through massed missile salvos. A coordinated attack might look like this. 20 DF-21D ballistic missiles launched from mainland China, arriving from directly above. Simultaneously, 40 YJ-18 cruise missiles launched from submarines and surface ships, arriving from multiple directions at sea level. Plus 20 YJ-83 missiles launched from aircraft, arriving from a third direction. Plus electronic warfare jamming to degrade the Aegis radar picture. 80 missiles arriving within a 60-second window, from 3 different directions, at 3 different altitudes, some subsonic, some supersonic, some hypersonic, all targeting the same carrier. Can Aegis handle 80 simultaneous targets? In testing, controlled, optimized, peacetime testing, Aegis has successfully engaged dozens of targets simultaneously. But testing is not combat. In combat, there's jamming, there's confusion, there's smoke and chaos and human error. The radar might be degraded by electronic warfare. The crew might be exhausted from days of high-tempo operations. The magazine might be partially depleted from earlier engagements. The honest assessment from military analysts, not the official Navy line, but the honest private assessment, is that a carrier strike group can probably defeat a moderate missile attack of 20 to 30 missiles. Against a saturation attack of 50 or more, the probability of 1 or more missiles getting through increases dramatically. Against 100, some are almost certainly getting through. And here's the economics of it. This is the math that is fundamentally changing naval strategy. A single YJ-18 costs China roughly $2 million. An SM-6 interceptor costs the United States roughly $4.3 million. For every $2 million missile China launches, the U.S. spends $4.3 million to stop it. But it gets worse. A carrier strike group carries a finite number of interceptors. Once those are expended, the ships have to withdraw to a port or resupply ship to reload. Reloading at sea is currently not possible for most vertical launch systems. The cells have to be reloaded in port with cranes. That means a strike group that fires all its missiles has to leave the fight for days. China can build missiles faster and cheaper than the US can build interceptors. And China can build launchers, trucks, submarines, surface ships, faster and cheaper than the US can build Aegis destroyers. In a long war, the math favors the side with the cheaper, more numerous weapons. This is why the Pentagon is investing billions in directed energy weapons, lasers, and railguns that have essentially zero marginal cost per shot. A laser doesn't run out of ammunition as long as it has electrical power. The Navy's goal is to replace the $4.3 million interceptor with a laser shot that costs about $1 in electricity. But that technology isn't ready, not yet. Maybe in 10 years, maybe 15. So can a $2 million missile sink a $13 billion aircraft carrier? One missile? No, almost certainly not. The carrier will be damaged, possibly severely, but it won't sink. 5 missiles? Probably not, though it might be knocked out of the fight. 20 missiles arriving simultaneously? Some will get through. The carrier will be hit. The damage will be severe. Flight operations will stop. Hundreds of sailors may die. The ship might survive, but it will be combat ineffective, which, strategically, is the same as sinking it. 50 missiles? Honestly, at that point, the question isn't whether the carrier survives. The question is, how many of the 5,000 crew members make it off? The aircraft carrier remains the most powerful conventional weapon system on Earth. Nothing else projects power the way it does. Nothing else provides the combination of air superiority, strike capability, and strategic presence that a carrier strike group delivers. But the era of the carrier operating with impunity, sailing wherever it wants, untouchable, is ending. The missile revolution has changed the math, and both the United States and China know it. The US is adapting, investing in longer-range aircraft, distributed operations, unmanned systems, and laser defenses. The carrier of 2040 will look and operate very differently from the carrier of today. But between now and then, there's a gap, a window where the missiles are faster than the defenses, where the math favors the attacker, where a weapon that costs less than a house in San Francisco could disable a ship that costs more than the GDP of some countries. That gap is what keeps admirals awake at night, and it should keep the rest of us paying attention. This is the final video in our series on aircraft carriers and naval warfare. If you watched all 8, from the Navy losing jets in the South China Sea to the missiles that might end the carrier era, thank you. Seriously, we're just getting started on this channel. Next week, we're shifting to a new topic, the most dangerous military base in the world, and the soldiers who are stationed there knowing they probably won't survive the first 24 hours of a war. Subscribe, share this with someone who thinks aircraft carriers are invincible. I'll see you then.